Gigabyte P17F version 5. This is the sort of what we'd say is the lowest level laptop that'll give you a really good gaming performance for moderate games. It's got a gaming score here of 26%, which they classify as a RAF on Userbench. To compare that to our good place to start computer also with the 950, but with the extreme gaming version, there we got a 40%. So the laptop setup in terms of gaming is quite a bit down on the desktop. That's why we'd normally really recommend a desktop if you can afford it and if it's practical for you. For normal work as a desktop, it's only 2% under our 6600 computer, and for workstation only 1% under. If we look at the actual CPU score, we again got above average for this one, and it's saying it's a very good bench of 71.8%. But if we compare that to a 6600 65 watt desktop i5, that is at 86%. So this, even though it's one of the best mobile processors you can get, the 45 watt versus the 65 watt, you're still down quite a bit on it. And this is one with hyperthreading as well. Single core performance, we got 74% here on the laptop. The desktop one was at 88% for the i5. And quad core performance, we're at 78% compared to the i5 desktop's 102%. The only place where we score a little bit, and this is because of the hyperthreading, is here. For multi-core we got a 77% here, whereas the 6600 only had a 67%. But that's purely due to the fact that this is basically the mobile version of the 6700, which does have hyperthreading. In terms of the actual graphics card, it's the 950M, which we scored above expectations by quite a bit, and even with that above expectations, in laptop flavor the 950 does classify as poor. If we move on to 3D Mark Firestrike, it's quite a respectable score, 2800. That really is very, very decent. If we compare it to our good place to start computer with the desktop 950, it's about 1,000 down. So it's 3,800 for the desktop. So again, we're lagging behind quite a bit, but it does make sense, because for graphics score, here we have 3,100, where the desktop card actually gives you 4,500. And if you actually look at the physical card compared to the processor, you'd understand why. The physics score is actually better than the 6600 on this one. The 6600 got about a 8,000 flat, where here we've got a 8,900. So if we look at where this fits us in the grand scheme of things, we're only better than 12% of results of people using 3D Mark. So, but it sort of fits closer to a gaming laptop than what they'd call a notebook, but it's not perfect for gaming still. But very respectable given the price for a laptop. If you want a serious gaming laptop, the prices shoot up to an insane levels very quickly, and then for gaming, we'd almost always rather recommend going for a desktop. Now here we have TimeSpy. This is the new DirectX 12 benchmark. Again, we got quite a bit better than what they have here as a gaming laptop, so I'm not quite sure what they were using, but I have a feeling the big thing is in DirectX 12 the CPU is quite a big effect, and I'm sure we'll see that with some of our other laptops we're going to test, is that this is an exceptionally nice CPU, and that brings the score up, but we're only better than 2% of the results. But basically what this says, for DirectX 12, the newer games, laptops don't really cut it, as this is one of the better laptop processors available on the market, and we're quite significantly behind what you would get with something like a good place to start with the 970 is typically very similar to this VR machine of theirs there, and that comes in at only a few thousand more than this laptop. So, and for new games it's about a third of the performance, so it's a good option. I use a laptop like this myself as my daily use computer. It's excellent for that. For gaming, however, it really is sort of at the minimum which I would consider acceptable. Here we have Dota. running at P1080. It seems to be running perfectly smooth with everything set to maximum. Unfortunately the software turns on VSync, so we're limited to 60 frames, but that's perfect. It is a 60 frame per second screen. Here we have Counter-Strike Go. We're running nice high frame rates. We're stuck at 60 frames per second, which is perfectly fine. It seems to be running very nice and smoothly. No problems at all. So for Counter-Strike Go, this laptop's more than you would need. The 950 is performing flawlessly. We're getting a little bit of screen tearing. Here we have Civilizations 5 running at P1080 with everything set to medium. This seems to be the ideal sort of resolution for this game with this laptop. As you can see, the frame rates drop down a little bit at the end of turn, but then they go back up to 60. It seems to be running perfectly smoothly. We have got animations enabled. Here we have Call of Duty 5 Nazi Zombies. As you can see, no problem keeping 60 frames per second. Everything is very nice and smooth. So for this sort of generation game, this is more than sufficient. Okay, with Skyrim set to Ultra, we can see this 950 is struggling a bit. We're dropping down to about 24 frames per second, which is a little too low. Let's see what settings it'll be happy with. Here we have Skyrim running on high with anti-aliasing off. This seems to be sort of a playable level. We're sitting at the mid-40s with this very busy scene. I've had a bit of a walk elsewhere. Most other areas we seem to be keeping at good 60 frames per second. Here we have Borderlands pre-sequel. This is running at P1080, but settings mostly low with one or two things set to medium. We're seeing mid-40s. We saw 60 a little bit earlier, but we're seeing playable frame rates here. It's not ideal, but I think you'd probably be happy with the experience. Here we have Project Cars. It seems to be running actually surprisingly smoothly on here. This is P1080 with everything set to low, and it seems to be running it quite nicely at these settings. It's not nice and playable. Here we have Battlefield 4 running at P1080, everything set to low. We seem to be getting a nice smooth 60 frames per second, which is excellent for any laptop to do this with Battlefield, although we have got everything set down to low, and it seems to be able to keep it 60 frames per second nicely here. Here we have Fractured Space running at P1080, and it seems to actually be running nice and smoothly. It's not the best frame rates, but we're seeing sort of mid 40 frames per second, which is decent, and it's perfectly playable at P1080, and you have got the option to set it lower still.